Welcome to Effective Speech Making. I hope you find this presentation worthwhile. I'm Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find me on the web at hsstaffing.com. We're going to be focusing on three things today: overcoming fear, speech writing, and speech delivery. It's a well-known fact that many people are scared to death of public speaking. It's a phobia for many. But there are ways to overcome fear, be it public speaking or anything else for that matter. One of the things that works is rehearsing. If you have confidence, that will help you to get over your fear. That is why actors rehearse before they perform. And a public speaking engagement is a performance. So rehearse. Now there's science to this, and I'll be citing some books in a moment. They say, people much smarter than I, neuroscientists, that if you label your fear, if you give it a name, literally give it a name, that will help you psychologically to overcome the fear. The important thing is to recognize the fear. That's what's called mindfulness. You acknowledge it, you accept the reality of its existence, and then you can overcome it. Now, when you are afraid, something very natural happens in your brain. A wall goes up. From time immemorial, we have built walls. Human beings have built walls to protect themselves. That's why ancient cities are walled. Walls protect. And in our brains, when we become fearful, a wall goes up, a chemical wall that protects that part of the brain that is responsible for what has kept humanity alive for millennia. The fight or flight response. You see the dinosaur coming at you, you run away. You don't stop to pet it. Modern day, you see a Doberman coming at you, you don't stop to pet it. You see a puppy, you stop and pet it. You're not afraid. Now, when that wall goes up and you're all stressed, there's a very simple way to knock the wall down. You take a deep breath. Oxygen negates all those chemicals that are forming in your brain, protecting your flight or fight response. Spinoza wrote that reason, being rational, will overcome emotions. And fear, of course, is a very powerful emotion. So when you feel yourself getting nervous, and you will, take a couple deep breaths and you'll feel better. It's a simple thing. We know it instinctively, we just don't do it. Now, the entire idea is to rewire your brain. There are negative things that people do that are stupid, and they become habit forming. However, if you do something intelligent that becomes habit forming, that will become a positive normal. You will know that you have control, and therefore you will be calm. So, this is the opposite of the negative self-fulfilling prophecy that we all know. If you are convinced you are going to fail, that's a pretty good guarantee that you're going to fail. But there can be a positive self-fulfilling prophecy when you have an expectation of success. You're going to do a good job. You have rehearsed. You know your speech. Now you're calm. You're focused on the solution, not on the problem. You can't do both. You can't have your brain thinking about the problem and the solution at the same time and to devote to each the same amount of attention. You don't want to devote any attention to the problem. You want the problem to disappear. The problem is in your head. You're afraid. You shouldn't be afraid. You know your stuff. It all comes down to practice makes perfect. And real change requires that you repeat over and over the act that you're afraid of. That means accepting speaking engagements. Doesn't mean that your first speaking engagement should be to 1,000 people. It should be to 10 people. 10 people, then 20 people, then 50 people, then 100 people, and you're fine. Because you'll realize it's not a big deal. You have done a good job previously. You weren't perfect the first time. You were better the second time. The third time, you were good. And the fourth time, you were great. That's what happens. I speak from personal experience. Everything I'm telling you today works because I've done it, and it worked for me. And if it worked for me, it'll work for you. So you're practicing your speech. You're rehearsing it. But a speech is not just words. It's also, as I said, a performance. So you have to go over it in your mind. What's it going to look like? And this is something that athletes do and salespeople do. They visualize what they're about to do. In baseball, the pitcher visualizes not throwing the ball, but pitching the ball. Going to get it into the strike zone. The batter visualizes moving the bat, swinging the bat, so it'll come in contact with the ball, and it'll get a hit. Now, Tesla had an interesting ability. Before he would physically invent something, he would see it in his mind. This was not Einstein's thought experiments. The man would actually see to the minutest detail what it was that he wanted to build. And once he had it, and in his mind he knew all the problems were gone, he then built it, and it would work, and the problems would be gone. So visualization is a great tool, but nothing guarantees success because things will go wrong. If I haven't already gotten tongue-tied in this presentation, I will get tongue-tied sooner or later. You're going to get tongue-tied. You're going to lose your train of thought. It's called being human. And if you want to know if it happens to the best public speakers, go to YouTube, search for Tonight Show with Johnny Carson bloopers. Bad monologues. See how he dealt with failure. It was hysterical. He didn't take it seriously. You shouldn't. Laugh at yourself. You mess up, you mess up. People will find you more believable, a nicer person, more real, when they see that you do not become defensive. When they see that you're just like them, you make mistakes, It's nothing to be ashamed of. If you laugh at yourself, nobody will be laughing at you. And that's why public speaking is the art of connection. You have to connect with your audience. Once you do that on a personal level, 99% of your problems will disappear, because then you're just talking to friends. Now we're going to look at the preliminaries for speech writing. We've gotten over fear. Now let's look at speech writing. First, there are plenty of occasions, and I cannot stand it when people read what is on a PowerPoint slide, so I will not be reading the takeaways. You can pause the video and read them at your leisure. Occasions are different. A speech that will work at a wedding won't work at a funeral, and a speech that will work at a funeral certainly will not work for a children's party. A business speech for a small presentation where you can interact with everyone around the table, literally, is totally different from speaking to a group of 250 people when you cannot interact with all of them. You'll be able to interact with some, but not all. These are the various aspects of an audience that you have to keep in mind. The size we just mentioned. Gender is also important. I know today it's not politically correct to say, but there is a difference between men and women. That's just a scientific fact. If you're speaking to women, you have to be cognizant of their sensitivities and sensibilities. Same for men. Education. Never talk down to anyone. But there's a difference between preparing a speech for university graduates and a speech for high school graduates. It is your job to connect with the audience. You just saw that in a previous slide. It's your job to make sure that the audience gets out of your presentation what you want them to, or what you're being paid to do. So you've got to make sure you're speaking to them in a way, at a level, that they will appreciate. This doesn't mean you speak down to them, but you speak to them in a way that they will understand, and you find that out by speaking to the organizer and getting as much information about the audience from them in advance so you know what you're getting yourself into. Also, their professional level. CEOs are not necessarily the smartest person in the room. Usually, the smartest people in the room are the frontline workers. However, if you're speaking to CEOs, their concerns are much different than the concerns of frontline workers. So, know your audience, not only by gender and not only by education, but also where they are in the corporate hierarchy. Then comes the fun part. How interested is your audience in the subject matter? Now, if they signed up for it, you've got nothing to worry about. But if they are there because they've been ordered to be there, the boss has said everyone is going to go and listen to Jane's speech, well, then Jane has a job to do. She has work to do. She has to engage the audience, make the presentation interesting, so that they will learn. And finally, you need to know what your audience wants. And even if they've signed up for it, it's not necessarily what you think. For example, Let's just say that you're giving a presentation on increasing sales. Fantastic. But there's a difference between increasing sales when it's business to business or business to consumer, or small business sales as opposed to enterprise sales. My advice is always to arrive early. And that way you can speak to your audience beforehand and get an idea from them of what they're actually looking for. And then you tweak the presentation accordingly. Length of time is critical. If you only have 5 minutes to make a presentation, you've got to get to the point quickly. You can't fool around. You can't tell long stories, which you can do in a half-hour or 45-minute presentation. And in fact, it's a lot easier to write a half-hour talk than it is to write a 3-minute talk. Now, humor is a very dangerous thing. What you think is funny, some members of the audience may not think is funny. This goes back especially to gender. It also goes to culture. It goes to nationality. You can say something that you think is totally hilarious and totally innocent and will be taken as a grave insult. You have to watch out for humor. And if you go in trying to get people to laugh and you're not a comedian, you could be in trouble. And if you are a comedian, for that matter, you could be in trouble. It's a lot easier, actually, to get people to cry than it is to get them to laugh. So being inspirational by telling a moving story is much more effective than being inspirational by telling a funny story. Here are some additional takeaways. When you're writing, it's human nature to hear what you are writing through your eyes. You're reading it. Well, that's no good for a speech. You have to read the speech out loud so you hear it, if you will, through your ears and not through your eyes. And when you're writing, be generous with commas. This isn't grammar. This is speech writing. And a comma can indicate where you want to stop for effect, where you want to stop to take a breath, where you want to stop to take a sip of water. That would also be for effect. Always look at your audience. Read their body language, because if you're losing them, you're going to have to think on your feet and figure out what's going wrong. So if all of a sudden everyone is looking at their phones, you've got a problem. You've got to figure out a way to win them back. One way to keep the energy level up is short sentences. Short sentences cause excitement. It makes the speech energetic. Long sentences are boring and people are going to lose track of what you're trying to say. So keep your sentences short. And remember the rule of 3. If you can say things, 3 short things, one after the other, that's impactful. And alliteration is the best way. Now, by personal format, I mean the format of a speech for a personal occasion, a private occasion, a wedding, a funeral. I'm a big believer in thanking people. So, unless you're the host, and let's assume you're not the host, you're given the opportunity to speak, you stand up, you say thank you thank whoever it was for the opportunity, who gave you the opportunity, and then you explain who you are and why you should be taking up a few minutes of everybody's time to talk about the person who is being remembered, who is being honored. Make it personal. How do you know them? How did you know them? It can be amusing, even if it's a sad occasion. Some of the funniest speeches I've ever heard were stories at memorial services. You congratulate the person who's being honored, pay your condolences to the person who's being remembered. You express pride in having known them or knowing them, and in being given the opportunity to speak, and you thank everybody. Keep it short. No one wants to hear a long, drawn-out speech at a private event. And remember, there will be other people, and if everybody speaks for 10 minutes, you do the math. Now, business format is different. You want to thank the person who introduced you. You want to thank the person who invited you. If it's appropriate, you want to thank the people who set up the event, literally and figuratively. And you, of course, want to thank the attendees. But you never want to introduce yourself. Someone else should introduce you. Worst case, there's nobody there to introduce you. You get up and you don't have a PowerPoint with a slide on it that says the topic and your name. What I've done in the past is I've said, my name is Bruce Hurwitz. If you're here for a talk on effective speech making, you're in the right place. If you've come for a talk on financial management, you're in the wrong place. People will chuckle. They know who I am. Everyone should know who you are before they enter the room. They should have read your bio on the invitation. Or it should be in the form of a handout. There is nothing more boring than listening to someone read a bio, especially if it's their own. So don't do it. Don't say what the topic is, assuming that you're not introducing yourself. Say what you're going to learn. Don't say, this is a talk on effective speech making. Say, you're going to learn today how to overcome fear, how to write a speech, and how to deliver a speech effectively. That's it. Then you begin with a story or a great quote. I'm going to stop here, and then we'll come back to the remaining points in a few minutes. Stories are great. Storytelling is how people have always learned. So let me give you a few very quick examples. Let's say you are giving a talk on recognition. Stephen Hawking was paid the greatest recognition, the greatest honor that I think anyone has ever been paid in modern times. He was buried between Sir Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin. You can't get a better piece of real estate than that. That's an honor. It's a nice story. Let's just say you're giving a talk on self-awareness. Interesting hypothetical question. If you were to go to a river and pluck a fish out and ask the fish, what is it like to swim in water? Fish wouldn't know what you were talking about because fish are not self-aware. Now, we know that we live in air. But how would you explain to a Martian what it's like to live in air? It's kind of difficult. You have to think about it for a minute. The gentleman whose photo appears below that of Professor Hawking is Max Planck, generally accepted as the father of quantum mechanics, quantum physics. Now, this story is probably not true because to believe it, you will have to believe that no one knew what he looked like. which is ridiculous. But forget about that because it's still a good story. They say that Max Planck would travel around Prussia, Bavaria, at the time Germany today, giving speeches on quantum physics. And his chauffeur one day said that he was fed up. He had heard the speech so many times he could deliver it himself. So Planck said, okay, next stop, you'll do it. So the next time they went somewhere, they literally switched caps. Planck put on the chauffeur's cap. Chauffeur walked in wearing Planck's hat. And the chauffeur got up and made a great speech. He repeated everything that he had heard Planck say just the way he said it. And this is a good story when you're talking about the difference between knowledge and wisdom. He knew the speech, but he didn't understand it. They realized they were in trouble when he finished, even though he had done a great job. Because what happens at the end of a speech? Hands go up. Someone asked him a question, and Max Planck apparently was very good at hiring intelligent people, because without batting an eye, when the chauffeur was asked the first question and did not have the wisdom, the intellect to answer it, he didn't know the answer, but he had brains, and he looked at the person and said, that question is so simple, I'm going to let my chauffeur answer it. And Planck got up and answered it. Again, it's a cute story, probably not true. But what does that matter? Finally, those trees. This is a good story for a speech on dedication. Those are Chinese bamboo trees. You plant them, and for the first 4 years, nothing apparently is happening. Every day you have to water them and fertilize them and make sure they're getting sun. Nothing at all happens, visible to the eye. But in the 5th year, all of a sudden, in 3 months, they grow 80 feet. All the work pays off. Now, you don't necessarily have to start with a story. You can start with a quotation. The first one here is one that I like to use when we're talking about forming a team. Why do you need a chef if you've got cooks? Literally and figuratively. To quote from Don Rickles is really Mr. Rickles quoting his father. But it's an important quote because it also goes in a way to teamwork, but also networking. And finally, the quote from Will Rogers, which is probably my favorite of all. This has to do with reputation management. And in today's day and age of social media, thinking about what he said isn't a waste of time. Think about it. There are other ways to start. You can ask a question that will connect you to your audience. Or you can tell them something very interesting. For a New York audience, this quote, dealing with the Yankee superstar, their closer, Mariano Rivera, that puts things in an interesting light. And that's what you want to do. This is the story that I tell when I have someone who is receiving an award and they've hired me to write the speech for them. All I say is this. In 1956, Ernest Borgnine won the Best Actor Oscar for Marty. He beat James Cagney, James Dean, Frank Sinatra, and Spencer Tracy. And that's what made the award so special. He beat the greatest actors of his day. And it's the nominees for an award that make the win special. It's a very good story. Now, continuing on, you've told the story, now you've got to link it. You've got to show how it's relevant. You obviously have to cover your talking points. You should have 3 to 5, no more than 5 lessons that you want the audience to remember. 3 is usually the best number. Summarize the conclusions. So again, don't forget A, B, and C. Thank the attendees, and then invite them, if it's appropriate, to ask questions. If not, you may be told by the organizer, when you're done, ask the people to do something. Go to a different room. Perhaps you're speaking before lunch, and you should give them instructions, whatever you're told to do. That's the format of a business speech. Now for the delivery. There are 3 components to communication. There's the visual, there's the vocal, and there's the verbiage. Thus the 3 V's. 55% of what we say is visual. 38% is vocal, our tone of voice. Only 7% are our actual words. Think for a moment. How many times has someone said something and you didn't believe them? Because of their body language, because of their tone of voice. By now you've remembered, maybe a child, maybe an adult. The important thing to always remember is that when you are delivering a speech, you have to be confident. You have to seem to be confident. You have to have positive body language, positive tone of voice. You have to look at your audience. You have to walk around. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Your posture, you have to stand up straight, even if you're not walking around. If you're at the podium, you stand up straight. Why? Because your body language and tone of voice have to complement your words. Otherwise, you won't be believed. When you are delivering the speech, have a room temperature drink, water, available within easy reach. Dress appropriately. Ladies should never dress to show off their physical attributes. Men should never dress sloppily, if that's the right word. You want to always look professional. Don't wear perfume, don't wear cologne, don't wear scented aftershave. If people can literally not stand to be in the same room with you because you reek of some chemical, they're not going to stay for your talk. You don't want anything embarrassing. You want to make sure. Well, I'll just give you one simple example. I can remember hearing a gentleman give a talk that I was very interested in, and the only thing anybody in that room remember about that speech is the fact that he had spinach between his teeth. You don't want to be that man. You want to make sure that everything that's supposed to be zipped is zipped and everything that's supposed to be buttoned is buttoned. So basically, before you go on stage, you go into the restroom and look in the mirror. If you have a microphone and it's handheld, keep it near your mouth, but below your chin. You don't want to appear to be eating an ice cream cone. You also don't want to be spitting into it when you say P's and B's. And be prepared for a technological disaster. The PowerPoint won't work. That's usually the worst thing that happens today's day and age. The technology isn't going to be available for whatever reason. So you have to have a backup. When I give a presentation, I have my PowerPoint, if I'm using a PowerPoint, on 2 separate flash drives, and I've also got it on my phone. And I will bring 1 printed copy of it just to be triple sure. So there's no reason why I cannot give the presentation. I'm not dependent on the technology. If I have it, great. If I don't, it's not a problem. That's my plan B. Now, if you are seated, that's fine. Don't forget to be animated. Don't keep your hands under the table. Let people see hand movement. Let them see that you are interested. Posture is important. Sit up straight. Now, if you're standing, you stand up straight. If you are at the podium, do not touch the podium. Podium is a great thing. It is a barrier between you and the audience. You don't have, it's a wall. It's protection. You don't have to think about your speech. What are you going to say next? Because it's on the podium. You've left your notes there or your cards. It's your security blanket. It's your safety zone. But don't touch the podium, because if you touch the podium, you'll start rocking back and forth. And if you're comfortable doing it, walk around. It's a large audience. You want to be communicating with the people on the right, if you will, people stage right, stage left, and in the center. So we have the 2 formats for the personal and for the business speech. And as I said previously, you can't say thank you enough. So I thank you for having taken the time to watch this video. And if you want to learn about my speech writing services, you can find them on the speech writing page of my website. Thank you very much, and good luck with your speech.